There is a moment that happens in the lives of people who have carried too much for too long. It doesn't arrive during chaos. It doesn't show up in the middle of an argument, a breakdown, or a dramatic ending. It comes later, when the noise has finally stopped. Maybe you're sitting on the edge of your bed. Maybe you're alone on a bus, staring out a window without really seeing anything. Maybe it's late at night, on a cold floor, when the world feels distant and quiet. The place doesn't matter. What matters is the sensation. It's subtle, almost polite. Not an explosion, but an inward collapse, like something inside you finally realizing it has been holding more weight than it was ever designed to carry. And instead of breaking loudly, it folds. No tears, no panic, no scene. Just a quiet internal sentence that feels strangely calm and devastating at the same time. I can't hold all of this anymore. People who haven't lived through prolonged emotional strain usually miss this moment entirely. They expect pain to be loud. They expect breaking points to look dramatic. But for those who have endured too much for too long, collapse has never been noisy. It's controlled, contained, almost graceful. Not because it doesn't hurt, but because the mind is trying to protect itself from shattering. This is the body's quiet request for relief. The nervous system lowering its shoulders after years of bracing. The heart admitting, without anger or blame, that it is tired of being strong in the dark. And here's the part most people don't understand. When someone reaches this moment, others often say, "You seem fine. You're handling it so well." But what they're seeing isn't strength in the traditional sense. It's survival efficiency. So the real question isn't why people who've been through too much don't break loudly. The real question is this: why does their breaking look so calm, so invisible, yet feel so unbearably heavy inside? That question is where this story begins. People often describe those who have been through too much with the same words. You're so calm. Nothing seems to bother you. You handle things better than most. But what they're witnessing isn't calm. It's numbness. Real calm is something you feel inside your body. It's an active sense of safety. A relaxed nervous system that knows it can respond without rushing or bracing. Numbness is different. Numbness is what happens when the nervous system has been overwhelmed for too long. When stress, emotional responsibility, or unpredictability lasts beyond what the body can process. The system doesn't explode. It conserves. It narrows. It turns the volume down on everything: pain, joy, excitement, disappointment, just to survive. Think of it like a device switching into low power mode to prevent overheating. The screen dims. Non-essential functions shut off. The system stays on, but only at the most basic level. This is why joy can feel distant. Why excitement doesn't land the way it used to. Why things that should upset you barely register. You didn't become indifferent. Your brain became protective. And from the outside, this protection is often mistaken for emotional maturity. People assume you're grounded, enlightened, unbothered by chaos. But peace is not the absence of feeling. Peace allows emotion to move through you safely. Numbness blocks emotion entirely. This is why your reactions may feel delayed, why your responses are short, why you notice yourself watching life rather than fully inhabiting it. Your nervous system is holding everything back, waiting for confirmation that it's finally safe to release. This isn't a personality flaw. It isn't emotional weakness. And it isn't something you chose. It's a survival response. Calm is chosen. Numbness is automatic. And for people who have been through too much, numbness often arrives long before healing ever has a chance. There's a type of maturity that people admire deeply, the kind that sounds steady, observant, emotionally intelligent. But for many who have been through too much, that maturity wasn't developed naturally. It was demanded early. Some people grow wiser through safety, guidance, and time. Others become mature because their environment gave them no choice. When a child grows up surrounded by emotional instability, unpredictability, or unspoken tension, they don't get the luxury of curiosity. They learn vigilance. They learn to read moods before they learn to name their own. They learn to sense shifts in tone before they understand words. They learn when to speak, when to stay quiet, and when to disappear, all before they understand why. While other children are learning how to play, they're learning how to stay safe. This is where hypervigilance is born, not as anxiety, but as adaptation. Inside the brain, the alarm system becomes overactive. It doesn't just respond to danger, it prepares for the possibility of danger. The mind starts scanning constantly. Facial expressions, energy changes, silence that feels heavy, pauses that feel loaded. To the outside world, this looks like intuition, like emotional intelligence, like someone who just gets it. But what's really happening is survival training. The brain learned that being prepared was safer than being surprised, that noticing everything was better than missing one critical signal. And here's the quiet cost of that training. Even when the environment becomes safer, the system doesn't automatically stand down. The brain doesn't forget how it survived. So you keep sensing storms in clear weather. You keep reading tension in neutral moments. You keep preparing for outcomes that never arrive. This doesn't mean your mind is broken. It means it became exceptionally good at keeping you alive in difficult conditions. Your sensitivity wasn't a flaw. It was preparation. A nervous system shaped by necessity, still trying to adjust to a world that no longer requires constant defense. For people who have been through too much, love rarely feels simple. It can feel beautiful. It can feel meaningful. But underneath it, there's often tension. Not because they don't want closeness, but because closeness has historically come with a cost. When early connection was inconsistent, unpredictable, or emotionally unsafe, the nervous system learns to brace, even during good moments. So when someone gets close, part of the body tightens instead of relaxing. Some respond by pulling away. They care deeply, but distance feels safer. They love, but they do it quietly, carefully, with one foot already prepared to retreat. Others respond by holding on tighter. A delayed message, a subtle change in tone, a different rhythm in conversation. None of it seems logical, but the body reacts before logic ever arrives. And some live in between. They crave intimacy, yet flinch when it's offered. They want to be seen, but fear that being seen will cost them something they can't afford to lose. So love becomes complicated, not because it's wrong, but because the nervous system is still negotiating safety. Over time, this constant emotional calculation becomes exhausting. Emotional exhaustion doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't show up as a breakdown or a dramatic exit. It shows up as fading. You still show up, but with less energy. You still care, but you say less. You still smile, but it takes more effort. Your presence becomes lighter, quieter, as if you're trying not to take up too much space. Even rest doesn't fully restore you. Sleep helps, but doesn't reach the tiredness beneath it. Distractions work briefly, then stop. From the outside, it looks like you're just busy, or introverted, or going through a phase. But inside, you're carrying years of emotional labor. Holding peace, reading rooms, regulating yourself so others don't feel uncomfortable. So you disappear the only way someone who has been strong for too long knows how. Slowly, politely, without making a scene. And when someone asks if you're okay, you say, "I'm fine." Not because it's true, but because explaining the exhaustion would take more energy than you have left. There is a kind of grief that rarely gets named. Not the grief of losing someone else, but the grief of losing yourself. Not all at once. Slowly, quietly, across years of surviving instead of living. People who have been through too much often carry this invisible mourning. They grieve the version of themselves who trusted easily, the version who laughed without checking the room first, the version who didn't rehearse conversations or scanned for danger in every pause. They grieve a self that felt lighter, a self that didn't worry about being too much or not enough, a self that moved through the world without tightening their chest at uncertainty. And this grief is hard to explain because how do you miss someone you became in order to survive? How do you grieve a softness you never fully got to keep? But this grief doesn't mean you're broken. It means you adapted. Healing doesn't begin by forcing yourself to be stronger. It begins by understanding that your nervous system has been in survival mode far longer than it was meant to be. Survival mode is intelligent. It sharpens you. It protects you. But it is not meant to be permanent. Healing starts with awareness, not judgment. Noticing when your body reacts before your mind understands why. Noticing when you brace after a harmless message. Noticing when you prepare for outcomes that haven't happened. Awareness turns unconscious survival into something you can gently work with. The next step is regulation. Not positive thinking, but calming the body itself. Slow breathing, grounded movement, walking, stretching, a hand on your chest, because your nervous system needs to feel safety before it can believe it. Then comes relearning connection. Slowly, with people who feel safe, not familiar. Consistency over intensity. Care over chaos. And here is the most hopeful truth. Your brain can adapt again. Neuroplasticity means the same system that learned to survive can learn to rest. Not to brace, but to breathe. Not to endure, but to live. People who have been through too much often become something rare. Not because their life was gentle, but because they remember the dark. They become steady, compassionate, deep. Like a lighthouse not shining because it is perfect, but because it knows where the rocks are. And now, your life doesn't have to be about carrying everything alone anymore. It can be about creating gentleness, creating safety, creating a future softer than your past. If this spoke to you, if you felt seen or understood, stay with us. Subscribe for the next chapter. And if you feel comfortable, share your story below. Sometimes, your quiet survival becomes the light someone else is searching for.